Now, I want to explain something, and I talked about this the other day. There is a mistake when we talk about the justices as the conservatives and liberals on the bench. There are constitutionalists on the bench, and then there are activists on the bench. The constitutionalists are, to be even more specific, originalists. They're trying to determine if the wording of the Constitution itself is somewhat ambiguous, what was meant by the framers at the Constitutional Convention, in the state ratifying conventions. They took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and they're showing fidelity to the Constitution because the only accurate way to interpret the Constitution is the way that they seek to do it. That doesn't mean that every single time they agree with each other, they may not. But they're not looking for sources outside the constitutional framework. They're not looking for arguments outside the constitutional framework to address these big issues. They're confining themselves to the original intent, the language and the original intent of the framers. So they are the constitutionalists or the originalists. Then you have, quote unquote, the other side. They're not any of those things. They are activists. They can't even properly define what their philosophy is. But we know enough about it to know that they do not believe they are limited to the Constitution. And so you get these perversions, a living and breathing Constitution. If you want to know all about that, you can consult with my book, Men in Black, and get it at a library, I get wherever. I'm not hawking it. I think it's 5, 6, 7 years old. I don't even remember. But it explains all of that. So we're not talking liberal conservative. We're talking constitutionalists and originalists versus the opposite, activists who seek to rewrite the Constitution or think they are in a nonstop constitutional convention. I'll give you an example. There was a time when the Supreme Court, for the most part, understood the limits of its power. The Constitution actually had to be amended to eliminate slavery in the states. The fact that the Civil War was won wasn't enough. Our premier governing document needed to reflect that. So we have what are called the 3 Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendments. Today, the Supreme Court amends the Constitution endlessly. And this is what we object to. So a guy like E.J. Dionne takes that and then claims that the constitutionalists on the Supreme Court this week were being activists. In fact, the title of his preposterous piece is Judicial Activists in the Supreme Court. 3 days of Supreme Court arguments over the health care law demonstrated for all to see that conservative justices are prepared to act as an alternative legislature, diving deeply into policy details as they were members of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. And he goes on to talk about the kinds of questions they asked. And yet, that's not what they did at all. They said, look, this individual mandate, we can't find a justification for this anywhere in the Constitution or the history, and specifically of the Commerce Clause. And then they respond to the arguments that are in the briefs. And they respond to the lawyers arguing in front of them. And they're trying to, which they always do, delve into these issues as a matter of logic and reason by arguing about potentially parallel circumstances or conflicting circumstances or arguing in the alternative. They're not sitting there as members of a committee trying to rewrite this statute. As a matter of fact, yesterday at some length on this program, you heard me play the audio of Scalia, among others. Kennedy saying basically, how can we rewrite this thing? That's Congress's job. And yet here we have E.J. Dionne, and this is the bizarre, perverse world of the left. So when a justice or justices do their very best to discern what is compelled under the Constitution to get as close to the mark as they can. And if they have something before them that violates, in their view, the Constitution, whatever the policy argument, and when they dig in deep trying to figure out, what side to fall on or how this works or what's the judicial precedent for this and so forth, according to E.J. Dionne, they're acting like judicial activists. E.J. Dionne, his mind is so poisoned with his ideology, he's such a complete, predictable hack, that only he would take what you and I heard on that audio from the originalist, constitutionalist justices and twist that into judicial activism. The man doesn't even know what he's talking about anymore. We'll be right back.